You know, there's something about small towns that gets under your skin. Maybe it's the way everyone knows everyone, or the way secrets have nowhere to hide. Tonight, I'm taking you to 10 places that most people have never heard of. Places where the past refuses to stay buried. I've spent months researching these stories, talking to locals, reading old newspaper archives that haven't been digitized yet. And I'm telling you, some of this stuff kept me up at night. So turn off your lights, put in your headphones, and let me tell you about the forgotten haunted towns of America. Story 1. Dudleytown, Connecticut, the village of the damned. Let me start with a place that doesn't technically exist anymore. At least, not on any map. Dudleytown sits in the hills of Cornwall, Connecticut. And when primer size sits, I mean what's left of it: crumbling foundations, old cellar holes, and trees that have reclaimed everything else. The state won't even acknowledge it on official records anymore. But here is the thing that gives me chills. There is a reason they want people to forget about Dudley. The town was founded in the 1740s by the Dudley family, who fled England under a curse. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but stay with me. Back in England, Edmund Dudley was executed for treason in 1510. Legend says his entire bloodline was cursed. Every Dudley who came to America seemed to prove it true. Within decades of settlement, residents started reporting strange things. Shadows that moved independently of any light source. Voices in the woods speaking languages no one recognized. Animals refused to enter the area. Then came the deaths. In 1774, Gershom Hollister's entire family died from cholera in a single week. His wife went insane from grief. Gershom himself was later found dead in the woods, no apparent cause. The town doctor said the look on his face suggested he'd seen something no man should ever witness. In 1792, William Tanner's wife was struck by lightning while standing in her kitchen. Inside her house, on a clear day, General Herman Swift moved there in 1804. Within 2 years, his wife had gone violently insane. His children died under mysterious circumstances. One by one, Swift himself spiraled into madness. The last time anyone saw him, he was wandering the woods, talking to people who weren't there. By the 1920s, Dudleytown was completely abandoned, but people kept going there. Curiosity seekers. Paranormal investigators. Teenagers looking for a thrill. That's when the modern reports began. In 1972, 4 friends went camping in the Dudleytown ruins. Only 3 came back. The 4th, Michael Patterson, was found 2 days later. Catatonic. Unable to speak. When he finally regained enough awareness to communicate, he wrote the same 3 words over and over. They're still there. He spent the rest of his life in psychiatric care. A local woman named Claire, changing her name at her request, shared her story with me last month. In 2019, she went hiking near Dudleytown. She claimed she saw a little girl standing in the ruins. The child wore old-fashioned clothing. When Claire called out, the girl smiled. Her eyes were completely black. Empty. Like voids. Claire ran. She has never returned. Today, the land is owned by the Dark Entry Forest Association. It's closed to the public. Trespassers are prosecuted. Officials say it's because of unstable structures and dangerous terrain. But locals will tell you the real reason. They say something in Dudleytown wakes up when people come around. And whatever it is, it doesn't want visitors. It wants residents. Story 2. Alton, Illinois. The most haunted small town in America now. I know what you're thinking. Wait. People have heard of Alton. And you're right, sort of. Most people only know it as Mark Twain's hometown. What they don't know is this: Alton. Illinois has more documented hauntings per capita than any other small town in America. Alton sits right on the Mississippi River, and it carries a dark history most travel guides leave out. During the Civil War, Alton was home to a Confederate prison, and calling it a prison is generous. The Alton military prison was a death sentence. It housed more than 12,000 Confederate soldiers in a space designed for fewer than 1,000. Disease, starvation, brutal winter conditions. Over 1,500 men died in just 4 years. The prison was eventually demolished. But here's the disturbing part. A residential neighborhood was built directly on top of the mass graves. I'm not exaggerating. There is a subdivision called Mansion Heights sitting on Confederate burial ground. And the residents? They have stories. Linda Morrison has lived on State Street for over 30 years. She told me that every February, the month when prison conditions were at their worst, she hears marching boots in her basement, dozens of team moving in formation. When she goes downstairs to check, there's never anyone there. But that's not even the scariest part of Alton. The McPike Mansion is a 15-room Italianate house, abandoned since the 1950s. It's widely considered the most haunted building in Illinois. And I say widely, because Alton has stiff competition. Paul Leichinger owned the mansion for years and tried to restore it. During that time, he documented hundreds of paranormal events. Doors that wouldn't stay closed, lights turning on and off, voices, footsteps, and the smell of lilacs appearing in the middle of winter. Out of nowhere. But here's what finally made Paul leave. One evening, he was working alone in the house. That's when he heard a woman singing upstairs. A soft, mournful lullaby. He went up to investigate. The temperature dropped so fast his breath crystallized in the air. At the end of the hallway, he saw her. A woman in a white 1800s-style dress, rocking in a chair that wasn't there, cradling an invisible baby. He blinked. "Say, what's gone?" But the next day, a rocking chair appeared in that exact spot. No one knows where it came from. Alton is also home to the Mineral Springs Hotel. A serial killer once stayed in room 219 while he murdered a little girl. That room still exists, and guests refuse to stay in it. They report waking up to the sensation of small hands touching their faces and the sound of a child crying inside the walls. But the most disturbing location in Alton is the Enos Sanitarium. This was a tuberculosis hospital that operated from 1905 to the 1960s. Hundreds died there, many of them children. The building stands empty now. But every security guard who has patrolled it reports the same thing. Children's laughter echoing through the hallways. At Tres Ame, one guy quit on the spot after seeing a little boy in a hospital gown. The child stood at the end of the corridor. He waved, then walked straight through a wall. I tried to get permission to investigate the sanitarium for this video. The owners refused. They said they no longer allow paranormal investigations. Not since a team in 2015 had to be hospitalized for psychological trauma. What did they see? No one will say. Story 3. Stull, Kansas. The gateway to Hello. Here's where things get really dark. Stull, Kansas is a dying town with a population of about 20 people. There's not much there. A few houses, an old church, and a cemetery that's been called one of the 7 gateways to hell. Yeah, you heard that right. The legend says that twice a year, on the spring equinox and Halloween, the devil himself appears in Stull Cemetery. The old stone church that once stood there was said to be a meeting place for witches in the 1800s. According to local legend, a ritual was performed there. Something went wrong, and a doorway to hell was opened. Now, I'm a skeptical person. I deal in facts and documented accounts, but here's what I can't explain. The Catholic Church sent representatives to Stull on multiple occasions, and according to multiple sources, the Pope's private plane altered its flight path twice to avoid flying over Stull, once in 1993, and again in 2000. Why would the Vatican care about a tiny town in Kansas? The church was demolished in 2002. Officially, for safety reasons, but locals say it was torn down because of what kept happening there. In 1974, a group of college students went to the cemetery on Halloween night. They found a gravestone with no name on it, just one thing carved into the stone. 1666, when they touched it, all of them felt an electric shock. One of the students, a guy named Brett, took a photo. When the flash went off, everyone heard a scream, not from any of them. From beneath the ground. They ran, but when the film was developed, there was an extra person in the photo. A man in old-fashioned clothing, standing behind them, a man who wasn't there. In 1988, a journalist named Holly Roberts went to investigate. She interviewed an elderly woman who had lived in Stull her entire life. The woman told her this. My grandmother witnessed a gathering at that church in 1903. She saw things she would never speak about, but before she died, she told me one thing. The people in that church weren't worshiping God. They were worshiping something else, and they made a deal that would last 100 years. 1903 to 2003. 100 years. That night, Holly went to the cemetery. She recorded audio. When she played it back, beneath the sound of the wind, there was chanting in Latin. She sent the recording to a priest. He translated part of it. Then he refused to say what it meant. He blessed her and told her to never go back to Stull. She didn't listen. She returned in 2003. The supposed end of the deal. Holly Roberts was found the next morning in the cemetery. Unconscious. She had no memory of the previous 6 hours, but on her arm was a burn mark. A handprint. With 6 fingers. She left Kansas soon after, and she has never spoken publicly about Stull again. The cemetery is now closed to outsiders. Guards patrol the area especially around Halloween. They say it's to prevent vandalism. But why would a town of 20 people need security guards? Story 4. Centralia, Pennsylvania. The town that burns below this one is different. This isn't about ghosts in the traditional sense. This is about a town that's been consumed by hell. From beneath the ground, Centralia, Pennsylvania had over 1,000 residents in 1962. Today, there are 5 people left. 5. Here's what happened. In 1962, the town tried to clean up a landfill by burning trash. Standard procedure. Except the fire spread. It reached an exposed coal seam beneath the town. The coal mine caught fire, and it never stopped burning. 63 years later, that fire is still going. The ground is hot to the touch. Steam and toxic gases rise from cracks in the earth. Sinkholes appear without warning, swallowing roads, yards, and entire structures. The government evacuated Centralia in 1984. In 2002, they revoked its zip code. Centralia legally no longer exists. But here's what nobody talks about. The people who stayed and what they experience. One of the last residents, a man named Tom, gave an interview in 2018. He talked about the sounds. At night, he says, you can hear screaming coming from the mine shafts. Screaming that doesn't sound quite human. He tried to explain it away. Gases! Shifting rock tin post said, and said, sometimes. It sounds like it's forming words. In 1981, before the full evacuation, a 12-year-old boy named Todd Dombuski was walking in his grandmother's backyard. The ground opened beneath him. A sinkhole swallowed him whole. He fell 4 feet into a smoking hole over 150 feet deep. His cousin managed to grab him and pull him out. Todd survived. But he said something no one could explain. He said that while he was inside the hole, he saw faces in the smoke, dozens of them reaching for him. The remaining residents refused to leave. When asked why, they give vague answers. It's home. They can't afford to relocate. But one woman Mary told a documentary crew something chilling. Say yeah, we're not staying because we want to. We're staying because it won't let us leave. Every time someone tries to abandon their house permanently, something brings them back. The crew thought she was being poetic, until they learned that 3 families who moved away in the 1990s all returned within a year. When asked why, they couldn't explain it. They just said they had to come back. Graffiti Highway. A section of abandoned Route 61 became a destination for urban explorers. Steam rising from cracked asphalt, a road literally falling apart. But there were reports. In 2015, a photographer took pictures at sunset. When he reviewed the photos later, there were shadows on the road, shadows that weren't there when he took the shots. Tall, thin, too tall, too thin, standing impossibly still. In 2020, the state covered Graffiti Highway with dirt. Officially, for safety reasons. But locals say it's because too many people were reporting experiences. Centralia is still burning. And maybe just maybe it's burned through more than coal. Maybe it's burned through the barrier between our world and something else. Story 5. Guthrie, Oklahoma, the murdered capital. Let me tell you about a town that was literally robbed of its destiny. Guthrie, Oklahoma was the capital of the state from 1907 to 1910. It was thriving. Beautiful. Full of grand Victorian buildings and optimism. Then, in the middle of the night, in June 1910, everything changed. The state seal, the Constitution, all government records, stolen. They were taken to Oklahoma City. Who's like that Guthrie stopped being the capital. The city went from boom to bust almost overnight, and that's when the hauntings began. Some people say Guthrie is angry, that the town itself became bitter and resentful, and that bitterness manifested into something else. The Stone Lion Inn is considered one of the most haunted places in Oklahoma. Originally, it was a funeral home, which, yeah, that alone is a red flag. Guests report being tucked into bed by invisible hands. The sudden smell of funeral flowers, the sound of children crying in rooms that are completely empty. But the worst part, Room 6. A little girl named Augusta died in that room in the early 1900s. Her spirit, they say, never left. Guests who stay in Room 6 report the same experience. They wake up in the middle of the night. A little girl is standing at the foot of the bed, just staring. One guest, a woman named Jennifer, told me about her stay. In 2017, she woke up at 3 a.m. and saw the girl. But something was wrong. Jennifer said the girl's eyes were too old. To knowing when Jennifer screamed, the girl smiled and said, "You shouldn't be in my room." Then she vanished. The Victor Hotel is another hotspot. Built in 1903, it was once a luxury hotel, but it saw murders, suicides, and one particularly gruesome death. A woman was found in the bathtub of room 312. Her throat was slit. No weapon was ever found, and the door was locked from the inside. Room 312 still has reports. Guests say the bathtub fills with water on its own. They hear choking sounds. And the mirror fogs up with a message written in steam. Get out. But the most haunted place in Guthrie isn't a hotel. It isn't even a house. It's the Masonic Temple. This massive building towers over downtown Guthrie. It's where the Scottish Rite Freemasons performed their rituals. The building is still in use. But certain areas are strictly off-limits to the public. A caretaker named David worked there for over 20 years. In 2020, he shared his experiences on a podcast. He said that late at night, you can hear chanting coming from the main temple room, even when it's completely empty. Locked. One night, David went in to investigate. He saw a robed figure standing in a circle. When he turned on the lights, te worigone, but the candles around the room were lit, even though no one had been in there for days. David quit the following week. There's a theory in Guthrie that the Masons performed a ritual to keep the city powerful, to keep it as the capital. When the capital was stolen, the ritual was broken, and whatever they had invoked, it got angry. Story 6. Lilydale, New York, the town that talks to the dead. And we're heading to a place that doesn't hide what it is. Lilydale, New York, is proud of being haunted. It's a town of mediums and spiritualists, where the dead are treated as part of daily life. But here's the thing, when everyone in town is talking to ghosts, how do you know which ones are real? Lilydale was founded in 1879 as a spiritualist community. Today, it has a population of around 275 people. Most of them claim they can communicate with the dead. The town offers readings, seances, healing services. At first glance, it sounds like a tourist trap. That's what I thought too. Then I heard about Inspiration Stump. It's a tree stump in Leolin Woods, where public demonstrations of mediumship are held. Mediums stand at the stump and deliver messages from the dead to audience members, in front of everyone. In 2018, a woman named Rachel attended one of these sessions. She was completely skeptical. A medium suddenly pointed at her and said, "Your brother wants you to know he forgives you for the accident. He says, It wasn't your fault, and you need to stop punishing yourself. Rachel froze. She hadn't told anyone she was going to Lilydale. She hadn't posted about it online. Her brother had died in a car accident 5 years earlier. Rachel had been driving. She'd blamed herself ever since. The medium continued. She mentioned the nickname Rachel's brother used for her, the song that played at his funeral, and the fact that Rachel still wore his watch. Rachel broke down. She left Lilydale in tears. She later said the experience changed her life. But not everyone leaves with peace. The Maplewood Hotel in Lilydale is notoriously haunted, especially room 22. A woman named Elvira allegedly killed herself there in 1930. It happened after a seance went horribly wrong. What went wrong? No one knows. After her death, her spirit supposedly became violent, scratches appearing on their skin. The television turns on by itself, always to static. But if you listen closely, you can hear a woman crying beneath the white noise. One guest, a man named Marcus, stayed in room 22. He woke up, unable to move. He said he saw a woman with wild hair and hollow eyes. When he finally broke free and turned on the lights, Marcus checked out immediately. It's Leolin Woods itself. A thin place where the veil between worlds is weak. People who walk the woods alone report the same experiences, the feeling of being followed. Whispers in languages they don't recognize. And sometimes they see figures standing between the trees. Figures that don't cast shadows. In 2019, a photographer went into the woods to capture autumn foliage. When he reviewed his photos later, every single one contained orbs of light. He posted the photos online. She said the photographer deleted the images immediately. People who had saved the photos reported the same thing. They began dreaming about the woods. Story 7. Tombstone, Arizona, where the dead don't rest. You've heard of Tombstone, Arizona. Everyone has Wyatt Earp, the OK Corral, the Wild West. But what most people don't know is that Tombstone earned its name in the most literal way possible. A man named Ed Schiefelin was told that all he'd find in that area was his tombstone. Instead, he found silver. And he founded a town. But here's the thing. He was only half wrong. There are a lot of tombstones in Tombstone. And the people buried beneath them, they're still angry. Boot Hill Graveyard is where the outlaws, gunfighters, and so-called undesirables were buried. Most of them died violently. Shot, hanged, stabbed. Some of the graves have epitaphs that say things like, hanged by mistake, shot by sheriff. Visitors to Boot Hill report disturbing experiences. Hands grabbing at their ankles, gunshots echoing when no one else is around. Figures in old Western clothing walking among the graves. A tour guide named Elena works at Boot. She told me she's seen the same ghost at least a dozen times. A man in a black coat and wide-brimmed hat, standing near the grave of a man lynched in 1882. Elena once approached him, thinking he was a tourist. When she got close, he turned, looked directly at her, tipped his hat, and vanished. But the most haunted place in Tombstone isn't a graveyard. It's Big Nose Kate's Saloon. The building was once the Grand Hotel, and it's seen more than its share of violence. A man was killed on the second floor during a poker dispute. A woman allegedly jumped from a third-story window after a breakup. The spirits there are active. Chairs move on their own. Glasses slide across tables. A swamper, the man who cleaned the bar in the old days, is still seen regularly. Still working, more than a century after his death. But then there's room 7. And that's where things get truly dark. A couple stayed in room 7 a few years ago. They woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of a man and a woman arguing violently. The arguing was coming from inside their room. The husband turned on the lights. The voices stopped. But in the mirror, he swears he saw 2 figures standing behind them. A man raising his hand as if to strike, a woman cowering on the floor. Then they were gone. The next morning, staff told the couple the truth. Room 7 was where a prostitute was murdered by her pimp in 1892. They'd been arguing over money. The couple checked out immediately. They refused to talk about what else they experienced that night. Another place you don't want to visit alone is the Birdcage Theater. It operated as a saloon, theater, and brothel. 24 hours a day. For more than 8 years, at least 16 people were killed inside. Shot, stabbed, beaten to death. The building is riddled with over 140 bullet holes. And the paranormal activity is so intense, even skeptics leave believing. A security guard once quit after being locked in the basement by something invisible. He pounded on the door for 30 minutes. Then, suddenly, it opened on its own. The next day, he reviewed the security footage. He saw himself banging on the door. But standing behind him was a translucent figure, a man wearing a bowler hat, watching. Tombstone is a place where violence soaked into the ground, and maybe that violence never faded. Maybe it's still echoing forward through time. Story 8, St. Francisville, Louisiana. Southern Gothic nightmare. Louisiana knows haunting, but St. Francisville takes it to another level. This small town is home to the Myrtles Plantation, often called one of America's most haunted homes. And yes, that place gets a lot of attention. But St. Francisville itself, it feels like an entire town, frozen in time, caught between the living world and something darker. Let's start with the Myrtles, because the stories there are insane. The plantation was built in 1796. At least 10 murders are said to have occurred on the property. The most famous spirit is Chloe, a slave who allegedly poisoned two children. Legend says Chloe was caught eavesdropping as Punis Menderir was cut off. She wore a green turban to hide it, in revenge. Chloe baked a cake using oleander flowers. Poisonous. She served it to the plantation owner's wife and daughters. 2 of the daughters died. Chloe's spirit is said to still haunt the plantation. Guests photograph a woman in a green turban standing on the porch. Even when no one is there, handprints appear on mirrors. Small handprints. The handprints of children. But here's what really gets me. The plantation has a photograph taken in the 1990s. It shows a man in old-fashioned clothing standing in a doorway. Experts have analyzed the image. They can't explain it. The figure wasn't there when the photo was taken. In 2016, a woman named Samantha stayed at the Myrtles. She woke up at 3 a.m. A little girl was sitting on the edge of her bed, crying. The girl was translucent. Samantha asked if she could help. The girl looked up at her. Her eyes were black. "Hello," she said. "She poisoned me." And then she faded away. But St. Francisville has more than just the Myrtles. Grace Episcopal Church has a cemetery where yellow fever victims were buried. Locals say that if you visit at midnight, you'll see ghost lights, floating orbs, bobbing between the headstones. In 2014, a group of teenagers went there to test the legend. They saw the lights. Then the lights started moving toward them. Fast. They ran. One of them, Kayla, tripped and fell. When her friends came back, she was unconscious. She woke up minutes later. She couldn't remember what happened. But on her ankle, there was a burn mark. A handprint. Small. Like a child's. The town itself has another reputation. Time slips. Moments where people claim they step backward in time. In 2018, a tourist named Greg was walking down Royal Street. Suddenly, everything changed. The cars were gone. The street was dirt. People wore clothing from the 1800s. He blinked, and everything was normal again. Modern day. Thought he'd imagined Italiano. Or worse. But when he told locals, they just nodded. "Yeah," they said. "That happens here." St. Francisville is beautiful. Most wrapped oak trees, antebellum architecture, southern charm. But beauty can hide darkness. And in St. Francis, the darkness is always just beneath the surface. Story 9. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, home of the Mothman. All right, We need to talk about Point Pleasant, West Virginia. In 1966 and 1967, this small town experienced something that defied explanation. Residents reported seeing a creature, a 7-foot-tall, winged humanoid, with glowing red eyes. They called it the Mothman. On November 15, 1966, two young couples, Roger and Linda and Steve and Mary Mollett, were driving near an abandoned TNT plant. They saw something in the shadows. It stood upright like a man, but it had wings folded against its back. Its eyes glowed red, like taillights. When it saw them, it spread its wings. A 10-foot wingspan, and it flew straight up into the air. The couples drove away at over 100 miles per hour. The creature kept pace with their car, flying alongside them. Watching them, they reported it to the police. At first, the authorities thought they were crazy, until more reports started flooding in. Over 100 people saw the Mothman in the following 13 months. A creature that shouldn't exist. A creature that seemed to be warning them about something. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed during rush hour. 46 people died. Mothman sightings stopped immediately after. Some believe he was a harbinger, a warning of the disaster to come. Others think he caused it, but everyone in Point Pleasant agrees on one thing. Something was there. Something real. The town embraced the legend. There's a Mothman museum, a Mothman statue, and an annual Mothman festival. But the real hauntings, those they don't advertise. The TNT, every other abandoned World War II munitions plant is a sprawling network of concrete bunkers, hidden in the woods. It's where the Mothman was first sighted, and it's where weird stuff still happens. People exploring the TNT area report strange phenomena. Electronic equipment malfunctioning, cameras dying instantly, flashlights going out, and the constant feeling of being watched by something not human. In 2015, a paranormal investigator named Jeff visited with a full team. They captured audio of massive wings flapping, even though nothing appeared on their infrared cameras. Then one team member, a woman named Ashley, started screaming. She said something invisible grabbed her from behind. She felt talons digging into her shoulders. Later, her shirt was examined. There were tears in the fabric and scratch marks on her skin. Something had definitely touched her. The abandoned power plant near the collapsed Silver Bridge is another hotspot. Security guards report seeing a dark figure on the roof. A figure with wings. In 2008, a guard named Tom was doing his rounds when he saw it. The figure turned to look at him. Those red eyes locked onto him. He felt paralyzed. Unableto mubi. Then it spread its wings and flew away into the darkness. Tom quit that night. Point Pleasant isn't just haunted by the Mothman. The site of the Silver Bridge collapse is haunted by the victims. Divers working in the river report seeing cars at the bottom. Phantom vehicles from the day of the collapse. They hear voices calling for help through the regulators. One diver surfaced early during a routine inspection. He was shaking. Paley said he saw a woman trapped in a car at the bottom of the river, pounding on the window, screaming silently. He went back down to save her. There was nothing there. The Mothman might be gone. But Point Pleasant is still haunted by what he left behind. Story 10. Helltown, Ohio. The town that shouldn't exist. We end with a place so disturbing, the government tried to erase it from existence. Boston, Ohio, was a small town in Summit County. In 1974, President Ford signed legislation to expand Cuyahoga Valley National Park. The government began buying up properties through eminent domain, but something went wrong. The town was evacuated, but the buildings were left standing. Empty churches, abandoned houses, a school with desks still in the classrooms. And then the stories started. People began calling it hell. Legend says the government didn't evacuate Boston for a park. They evacuated it because of a chemical spill from a nearby toxic waste facility, a spill that mutated the residents. That's the legend. Here's what's true. Stanford Road, running through the area, has a dead end locals call the end of the world. Drive there at night, and cultists supposedly perform rituals. Multiple people have reported seeing robed figures in the woods, hearing chanting, finding strange symbols painted on trees. The Boston Township Cemetery holds a grave with an upside-down cross. Not vandalism, was originally placed that way. The grave belongs to a man who allegedly sold his soul to the devil. At night, people report seeing a glowing figure standing at that grave, watching, following. It won't let you leave until you acknowledge it. The abandoned school is even worse. Mother of Sorrow's Church, also called the Witch's Church, was abandoned after the evacuation. Satanists allegedly used it for rituals in the 1980s and 90s. But before that, it was just a church. In 1968, a priest named Father Thomas allegedly performed an exorcism that went horribly wrong. He tried to cast out a demon from a teenage girl. Instead of leaving the girl, the demon left her body and possessed the priest. Father Thomas killed the girl during the exorcism. Then he killed himself. His spirit supposedly haunts the church. People entering report being pushed, scratched, and choked by invisible hands. In 2012, a group of urban explorers recorded video inside the church. They joked while exploring until one of them, a man, started gasping for air. His friends rushed over. He was clawing at his throat, unable to breathe. Red marks appeared on his neck marks that looked like fingers. They dragged him outside. He finally caught his breath. He said someone was choking him, but there was no one there. They never went back. The government finally demolished most of Helltown's buildings in the 2010s. They said it was for safety reasons, to discourage trespassers. But locals say it was because too many people were disappearing in those woods. Too many came back. Chains. The National Park Service patrols the area now. They'll ticket you if you explore, but rangers report strange experiences too. One ranger, anonymous, said he was patrolling at dusk when he saw a little girl standing on Stanford Road. She wore a white dress, covered in dirt. He approached her, asking if she was lost. She smiled and said, "They're coming back. They're all coming back." Then she walked into the woods and vanished. He searched for hours. He never found her. Helltown might be gone, but whatever was there, it's still in those woods. After researching these towns, I don't sleep as well as I used to. There's something about knowing these places exist, that these things happened, and in some cases, are still happening. These aren't just stories. These are real places, with real people, who have experienced things they cannot explain. Things that defy logic. Things that suggest there's a lot more to this world than what we can see. I want to know what you think. Have you been to any of these places? Do you have your own stories about small towns that no one talks about? If you could visit one of these haunted towns, knowing what you know now, which one would it be? Would you go alone, or bring someone with you? Leave your answers in the comments. I read every single one, and some of your stories have inspired future videos. If you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for spending the last hour with me in the darkness. If you enjoyed this deep dive into America's forgotten haunted towns, hit that like button and subscribe my channel. Your support means a lot to me.